guess there's multiple aspects or dimensions to that question. It seems to me that it's been coming up more in what you call the satsang movement in the context of whether this waking realm is of importance or not.
Mm-hmm.
How do you, if at all, participate in this, or is it all sort of sahaja and it's just natural, whatever is coming up, in whatever shape and form it looks like? And it doesn't apply to any human, quote-unquote, moral standards.
Yes, I hear you. You want to say more to that?
Well, I can say from my experience that at a certain stage, there was certainly a following of teaching that talks about transcendence. And there's a joy in that. And in a sense, kind of the shit hit the fan of coming back to quote-unquote reality from a human standpoint of, have to work and do this and that and not just sit on the cushion and meditate. And experiencing a lot of psychological stuff that I thought I quote-unquote transcended, but evidently not.
Mm-hmm.
So there are teachings that I find that are talking about embodiment and are saying, take a look at that psychology. And there are teachings that are saying that psychology is just a pixel in the picture. And I get both of that.
Mm-hmm.
And yet I have a certain, sort of a, I don't know if a love-hate, but a dualistic sort of approach to that. Sometimes I'm like, I think I do want to embody that. I do want to be here and in the human sense as well. And then there's the majority of the time just following kind of the typical body-mind psychology and falling into high habits and whatnot. And then, it's just awareness playing. So that's kind of the lack of clarity where I'm at.
So where is the dilemma exactly? Where is the dilemma? Is it somehow lack of validity in the human experience? You feel that where is the purpose? Where is the raison d'etre of all this? I just want to see where your dilemma, where your personal dilemma, where you are invested in that. Because it's hypothetically, if we begin to speak hypothetically, then we run the danger of essentially, So like for you personally, where do you see the dilemma in this? In the teachings, let's say there's this, there is teaching that essentially doesn't recognize any possibility of anything that we can consider to be human as an experience. It's simply dream with an awareness, right? There are variables of how it's spoken. And since it's not even your dream, it's the dream, then how can you ever be even in the picture? And there are teachings that are more emphatic in terms of how spiritual disciplines and spiritual teachings are applicable to this life. We can almost detect here a humanistic traditions, right? If we just look at it from the grand historical perspective. There are humanistic traditions. Humanistic tradition is characterized by trying to find anything that happened to us as earthlings in terms of how it is in reference to us as human beings. So in other words, religious experience, like all what pertains and takes to be human. So that you can recognize that echoes or allusions to these humanistic traditions in some teachers who advocate that, well, wait a minute, If this spiritual tradition, or if this spiritual approach is not in reference to the way we live our life, then it's dangerous or simply irrelevant or. I'm just helping to locate, even to contextualize these traditions. And there is everything in between, of course. But for you, where do you feel the dilemma in that? For you personally?
Well, even the way I sort of act and work in the world, what do I, does it matter at all? Or,
Mm-hmm. So yes, in other words, is there any purpose to life, right? Because there has to be some...
Is it just a hedonistic thing where, okay, enjoy as much as you can while it lasts?
Well, you see that if you are real hedonistic, but if you're amateur, then you are in danger. You see, because usually people, they kind of like you. If you truly look into the roots of the hedonism, as with most isms, it pertains to be philosophy. It pertains to have an ideological platform. The problem with our age is we live in postmodern age, which is notorious for its fusion. And fusion is like, I like a bit of this mixed with a bit of that. And I don't need to go for more of that, nor of more of that. Just a bit will be enough. And then I'll do my own thing at home, right? As I play my own favorite fusion music, right? And watch on Netflix, I can decide what I want to watch,
No, I'm well aware that hedonism sounds better than it is, and I certainly, personally, am not able to follow that exclusively. Otherwise, I wouldn't even be here, probably. And I don't think I've encountered anyone who's done it 100%.
So it's the purpose we're speaking about. It's finding the purpose. Or is there a purpose?
Yeah, it seems to me lately that there's also sort of a maturation into purposelessness.
What does it look like in your view?
Whatever it looks like in the moment.
Yes, but what does it pertain? Purposelessness. Can you settle on
that I have a direction that I think I'm going to, but at the same time I know that it's a very light sketch, and I don't know if that's going to work or not, and ultimately it doesn't really matter.
So in other words, still, whether we like it or not, we're speaking about, we're addressing here whether there is at all a purpose to this human existence.
Right.
Okay, if it is, we can speak about that. If it isn't, then what is this existence? What is this human existence if it doesn't have purpose? Let's say everything is already predetermined. Everything is already predetermined, and we only act our part without even knowing that we're doing so. Which means whether one has purpose or not, because that's, we see we're now trying to converge these two perspectives. We're converging these two perspectives through simple process of inference. Supposedly there is this predetermined outcome of how things unfold, which are always beyond our capacity to see, know, understand, and no amount of trying gives us any access to mechanics or whatever goes beneath, or whatever is really the moving and shaking force. In which case, it presupposes this. If that is so, what's the difference between having purpose in life and having none? If we are essentially simply willing, unwilling, or what have you, tools in manifesting something through our existence with which we try to reconcile this sense of being alive to whatever degree. Is there any difference between, okay, this man lives by, a woman, a great purpose, and this person is completely lives with no purpose whatsoever, just drifting. But from that perspective that we're exploring now, where everything is predetermined, is there any difference?
No.
Exactly. Is there any difference? Purpose and no purpose. It's already predetermined. We can, of course, now begin to make concessions and begin to speak of how it feels for the person who lives with a purpose versus for someone who lives without a purpose. Maybe the person who lives with a purpose, his or her life is richer. After all, there is this purpose. It's infused with a sense of importance, purpose. It gives the momentum, incentive to act. Whereas lack of purpose makes one essentially, well, whatever we may call it. But that will be a speculation, isn't it? There will be further speculation whether that is true, that the person with the purpose somehow lives a more elated perspective. Maybe it's the other way around. The person without a purpose actually is in a better off position, because the one with a purpose constantly have a headache of how to carry that purpose through, which often doesn't work in the way the river flows, and it's very difficult to change the course of the river flow. It's so difficult that it's impossible. And the one without a purpose somehow ends up being better off. Speculation, you see? Again, speculation upon speculation. We can only begin to tentatively approximate what would it be like. So it falls back squarely to my existential dilemma. We're not talking about here what can we make out of it collectively. It totally makes no sense. It's my existential dilemma. It's your existential dilemma. Is there any reference where we can partake that would help us to perhaps orient ourselves in a way that would result in releasing tremendous amount of energy, because we will no longer be burdened by that, not knowing what really is here in place. Because one way or the other, that most precious form of energy is mental energy. And this is where we expend ourselves the most, is the way we think and what we think about. You see? So the art of thinking here is of tremendous importance. Yes, there are perspectives that differ, but there is this perspective that the purpose of existence, now we don't speak about individual just yet, there's a purpose in existence, and the purpose of existence is expansion. Purpose of existence is expansion. Expansion, whatever that is, it's to expand. It's to expand. Some of you may have heard, and there's no such thing as Neo-Advaita, non-duality, without tracing its references back to where these terms originated in the first place. Satsang movement. Satsang movement is a Sanskrit term, sat-sang, right? So if we look for help into this tradition where these terms themselves originated from, the term Brahman is very well known. Brahman. Brahman stands for absolute. Absolute. Brahman. You read any philosophical book, crash course on Indian philosophy, it's the first term you will encounter. Brahman. Brahman. The root of that term, br, right, is literally stands for expansion. So though Brahman itself stands for the absolute, for pure transcendence, for that omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient quality of our pure awareness, let's call it. But the root term of that word is to expand. Is to expand. And tradition speaks of that Brahman, though transcends every absolutely quality that there is under the sun, everything is transcended, it still has inherent to its essence nature. To begin with, it represents being, so it's eternal. It's also conscious of itself, so it has that element, consciousness. And it's blissful. This term Satchitananda, you have heard, that's what these three terms represent. Satchitananda, being, consciousness, bliss. So bliss here is an inherent part, substratum of all our experiences and who we are in essence and where all our experiences take place. So if you put this together, no matter how maybe utterly purposeless this universe seems, and some of the brightest minds, one that came up with this whole Hubble business looking into the universe, said, the more I look into the universe, the less meaning it makes. The more I look into the universe, the less meaning it makes. It belongs to the Hubble. It's literally an interesting observation. It doesn't, instead of making sense, it begins to make less and less sense. And yet there is this perspective. Expansion of one's bliss. That's what Brahman really stands for. It's the expansion of bliss. So there is something to land on, even as tentative understanding. So that in itself can become into a valid leitmotif of one's life. Because it's not settling on concepts, it's not settling on ideologies. Does my life has purpose? Does my life... You know what? Between the one who is driven by purpose and the one who is purposeless, the only answer is whether either of them or both enjoy that expansiveness of their bliss. If that criteria is met, it makes no difference whatsoever. Live your life with however high business, on however high horse, as long as you are expanding in your own bliss. Or live your life totally like this pretending to be a Zen, Tao, what have you, walking around like a fool because it suits me, with no purpose whatsoever. I'm not interested in your games. All these are games. as long as I'm expanding in my bliss. It's not following the bliss. It's expanding as bliss. If following the bliss, or even following the blissful one, serves, let it be. It's already a valid enough reason. And that, believe me or not, a tradition in itself. A tradition is not made out of spiritual concepts. Every tradition we speak of ultimately made out and supported and validated by those who have managed to touch the ground of their own bliss and share it with the others. Then tradition is alive and in safe hands. Otherwise, it's a set of esoteric dogmas. Sooner or later, we become bored from and want to burp it out of our system. So, this is to purpose versus lack of thereof.
I guess for me, there's a confusion between sometimes where is that bliss. I mean, the bliss is very clear as something that's always here. Mm-hmm. As it relates to an activity of the body, sometimes it's clear, sometimes it's not.
Well, this is where, you see, this is where, if that resonates in any fibers of your being, if that somehow resonates, then this has to become your experience. No explanation, no intellectual concept will suffice. I tell you, bliss is within. Oh, fantastic, great. Or bliss is without. Or even better. You see? It has to be lived, experienced. It's very, very practical, down-to-earth understanding. Thirsty, I want to drink. I don't want to read poems about water. My lips are parched. Poems about water are going to irritate the hell out of me. You see? So that's the attitude. When your mouth is parched, the only thing will suffice, the only thing will quench is the true beverage of the moment. It is with bliss, because that's what it is. It's at the basis of all experiencing. It's not even something we're experiencing. One of the disservice that some of the dialogues, some of the discourses in the satsang is that bliss is just an experience and we want to go beyond. We don't want to be attached to experience. And bliss somehow began to be viewed as an object of experience. Could not be further from the truth. If someone spoke that, means they do not understand, nor of course they experience it directly to speak about it. Bliss is not experience. Bliss is a substratum of all experiencing. And when that becomes self-evident, when it rises within one's own field, then every experience is blissful, whether it's terrifying or beatific. It's not that this experience somehow infused with bliss and that experience somehow deprived of it. No, that's the extraordinary side of this. This is where all these concepts lay asunder. Because through direct experience, through direct partaking in that, realization comes that everything is already held in that and steeped in that which is nothing other than bliss of my own self. It's a terrifying experience. Terrifying experience. At first, we prefer to have bliss in and through positive experiences. And there is clinging to that and preference still working itself out. But when we transcend this feather, we realize that no experience rises anywhere other than in the bliss of my being. And that is, and could be, a horrifying experience. But experience which truly heals us, because that experience brings end to that devised and divisive universe of the mind. Because it's no longer polarized by my preferences. So, I simply invite you to sit with that, ponder on that. But we cannot talk about it, you see? Then the propensity, the decision has to swell enough in you to go towards, for it to become direct experience. So the proof of the pudding is in eating. Then these questions of, because once you touch that, then the sense of fulfillment comes already before you accomplish any action. You see? So in other words, if the leitmotif of my existence is a purpose that I direct my attention, then somehow the fulfillment would and should come from meeting the objectives of my purpose, which is totally the other way around. It is first the experience of fulfillment, and out of fulfillment, the purpose simply becomes a natural outcome of my fullness. Then it's a true purpose. Then the term Dharma, now spoken in this house, Dharma is truly lived, because Dharma is also translated as purpose. Highest religion, highest truth, Dharma. It's also why we are here, why I am here, why you are here. That's all pertaining to that what the term Dharma represents. It's the uniqueness of you as you. To find fulfillment in that is what the term Dharma truly exemplifies. And if you can do that, you fulfilled your Dharma. The purpose of life is already fulfilled. Do as you please.
Yeah, the way I hear that, it's pretty much the same. Abide in the self or that, and it's very clear to me. And it's just this, my experience is oscillating between that and a belief in a certain, well, any belief, I guess.
Well, abiding in as the self, abiding in the self is as long as that is accompanied by that what is this expansive sense of being, consciousness, bliss, really represents and stands for. Because there are those who claim abiding in the self as the self. And yet, if it is not accompanied by this sense of rising waves of bliss, then that can become a dry affair, you see? And this abiding as the self, sooner or later, would begin to present certain sense of dissatisfaction. Oops, it's not what I thought it would be like. And then lopsided philosophies are born out of these perspectives. Well, apparently life meant to be a misery, or apparently apparently it's all not meant to be taken as, like it's just ignore all this. Just abide as the self. And in some teachings this becomes like a mantra. It's like, and it becomes, to me, it's not different from religion. It's a religious perspective. It has that almost attitude and quality of preaching. You see? Whereas, well, enough been said.
No, I get it. It can't be a dry thing. It has to be alive.
So just simple answer. When you touch the bliss of yourself, then this dilemma of what is my life here? What am I here as a person? How do I reconcile my humanity with my divinity? Will simply lay aside. You see? It will no longer be pertaining to the philosophical discourse. You may want to go there if the propensity is there, and you may come up with amazing essays, books, and things to share. Why not? But the dilemma itself, that's why I've asked you, what is the dilemma? Dilemma will lay asunder. It will simply dissolve itself. The dilemma of that, what is this humanity? How does this humanity sits? How can that, what is experienced viscerally, these states of transcendence, and then back into that world of human experience, poses still a lot of well, let's face it, it still creates this sense of, it somehow doesn't sit congruently enough, coherently enough. And then the doubts are simply continue. Am I not doing something here? Am I falling short? You see, more transcendence. This is why in certain traditions, bliss first, understanding will follow. It has great value. Bliss first and understanding will follow. It has a purpose, tremendous purpose, that in itself. Because if one wants to settle on understanding without experiencing this, the sweetness of being can only come. Sweetness of being or lightness of being are all these terms in language which essentially speaking to the same thing. It speaks of that. What is that swelling sense of bliss? It's that inner swelling expansiveness that is being felt sometimes amidst of the densest contraction. It is always there, even at the moment of when outwardly calamity is our experience. That's where you need to be anchored. Anything else will fall short. But again, I'm not here now because I don't want to begin to convince you. You need to find your way, because it's obviously not separate from who you are.